A very good evening to all the viewers who have logged in from different parts of the world. We have professionals from insurance and banking sector, corporates, faculty, students and participants across various sectors. I'm your host Ashish Sahu from Amity Institute of Training and Development, managing client relations and training projects. I will take this opportunity to introduce AITD, which is a cutting-edge global learning and development service provider for performance-enablement solutions, helping organizations to nurture talent and make people thrive. During these tough times also, we have taken multiple initiatives to serve our corporate clients and community at large by conducting workshops on important aspects like dealing with stress, overcoming grief, navigating through challenges, besides the highly popular workshops on performance enablement and leadership studios. More details are available on our website www.aitd.amity.edu. Once again, I welcome you all to experience a very interesting conversation with plenty of insights on a very important aspect of technology, IoT and insurance sector today and in the future. With our guest this evening, Mr. Peter Pugh-Jones, based in the United Kingdom. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Ashish. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This will be a 1 hour session on a Q&A format. We will be happy to take up questions from the participants towards the end and request the participants to put their questions in the chat. Before we begin our session, I would like to briefly introduce our expert speaker today. Peter leads a team of expert industry consultants across Europe, Middle East, Africa and Asia Pacific region for the Global IoT division at SAS, which is the leader in business analytics, software and services, and the largest independent vendor in the business intelligence market. During a career spanning over 4 decades, Peter has worked all over the world in diverse roles and technology sectors and software industries. A passionate believer of utilizing the right tools and technology to deliver the best value and outcomes. Peter considers himself as a lifelong learner with an optimistic view of future of technology. With the convergence of robotics, analytics, artificial intelligence, and IoT on the cusp of the 4th industrial revolution, we believe there has never been a more exciting or important time to be working in the advanced analytics space as we begin the journey to operationalize artificial intelligence and transform all our lives for the better. In fact, in this session, Peter will be talking about IoT in the insurance industry and how advances in AI and IoT are driving innovation for the sector and forcing insurers to consider new ways to define policies and the revenue models. Peter will also share examples of his experience working with customers in different areas of the insurance industry, such as construction, shipping, transportation, and automotive. As I mentioned earlier, the topic of today's discussion, IoT insurance sector today and future, is a very interesting topic. And if I talk about Internet of Things, Internet of Things will radically change the world in coming years, and network devices will be a substantial part of this change. In 2010, people owned 12.5 billion network devices. It is estimated that we are nearing or having already reached 50 billion mark. IoT has entered everyday lives of consumers around the globe and transformed business models across industries. The environment brings opportunities for insurance as well to develop new products, open new distribution channels, and extend their role to include prediction, prevention, and assistance. In fact, by 2025, it is expected the insurance industry has the potential to automate 25% of its processes, especially manual processes like claim processing, underwriting, customer service, and policy administration. In fact, using AI and machine learning. Now, IoT technology with the proliferation of data from sensors and smart devices presents opportunities for insurance to improve underwriting and enhance personalization of products and services. The integration of IoT can also help in loss mitigation and prevention through behavior modification and active alerts. According to Forbes, IoT could help insurance cut the cost of claims processed by 30% and also lower premiums for consumer accordingly. So this is the context on which we will be talking about insurance, and we have our expert Peter, and he would like to be called Pete. So I will call him Pete. If it's okay with you, Pete?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Now,
Thanks.
coming back to the major part of this, where you will be taking us through and giving us your valuable insights. Now, before we start, we would like to know more about you and your organization. So, what has been the vision of SAS in attaining leadership position in IoT analytics solutions, and what has been the importance and significance of IoT in the insurance sector?
So Ashish, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. You've saved me lots of time describing SAS and where we are in the market, so I really appreciate that. Thank you. To help me tell just a little bit more information about SAS and the areas we focus, I thought it might be nice to share just a few slides to help sort of discuss the subject a bit more. So I'm going to share a couple of slides just while we do this part, and then I'll turn it off again in a moment. So we'll start with one of the sort of philosophies of SAS. So we are, as you mentioned earlier, one of the largest, in fact, we are the largest independent software company currently by revenue size in the world, which is, I think, quite an interesting achievement, with around about $3 billion revenue on a yearly basis. But to get to that point, how we get there and how we got there is focusing purely on an area of expertise within software, which is of course analytics. And what we do is we focus on helping people do what they need to do, deriving value from analytics in the life cycle of data. So as the data is gathered, as the data flows through their systems, doing the best we can to optimize where analytics can help the most. And so to do that, I just wanted to mention a couple of things on this slide. So we start by saying analytics is our core. We created something called an analytics lifecycle that allows us to help people think about looking at the data, figuring out how they work with that data, and then building analytics models and other things they might want intelligence from it that they can take and persist somewhere. And they might persist that analytics inside a platform. So one of the things SAS creates is an analytics platform which people can pick up and embed in their other platforms, such as an IoT platform. So you might have a platform of services around IoT. You might take the SAS analytics platform and embed it in there so that you can expand the value you get from the data that you're working with. And then beyond that, you might also take advantage of some of our own solutions that we've created, especially in the manufacturing and banking and insurance sector, where people utilize solutions we've built from our knowledge of 45 plus years of working in the analytics space to help make life easier for them to utilize and gain intelligence from the analytics that they create. So we have solutions for things like IFRS 9, we have solutions for risk management, and obviously those things are used all around the world at leading companies in those spaces. If we go and have a look at a little bit more about SAS, I'm sure many people on the call have heard of the company before, since we've been around a while, but may not be aware of the fact that we actually have offices in most major cities around the world. We have a development R&D sites in the US, which is obviously our head office, but we also have R&D in India. We have some in the north of England. North of England. Oops, I'll be shot by loads of Scottish people now. In Scotland, the country of Scotland, and we also have R&D in a few other parts of the world as well. We're about 15,000 people, roundabout strong around the globe, and some 6,000 of those people are PhD mathematicians or statisticians. So that allows us to be able to help our customers figure out what they want to do as best as possible with their analytics. So with all those things in mind, I'm then going to just do a little intro around the importance of data, because for us as an analytics company, it is really all about data. And I like to use this picture, which I'm not going to name the show, but I'm sure some people have seen that show before. And I'm going to use the word evolution to help explain why I've got that picture on there. So we're talking about evolution of technology, which leads to evolution of growth in data. So this slide is going to start by positioning something that some people on the call may have never seen before. It is actually the very first portable, or known as the first portable computer. That was called an Osborne 1. and it was originally launched in 1981. You can see that portable is perhaps a relative term. I mean, that's quite a chunky piece of equipment. And it is worth mentioning, this discussion, of course, is about connected devices. And I would say that the nearest thing to being connected that had was if you use the keyboard with your hands, then it's kind of connected, right? Okay. But the reason I've got it there is because I want to compare it to something that came into the marketplace only 27 years later. And to do that, we'll pop it up on the screen. So those of you on the call, I'm sure recognize an iPhone, the first iPhone in 2007. And the reason I'm showing you the two is because of that expansive growth. So that first computer is actually, would you believe, at launch of the iPhone, the Osborne 1, adjusted for inflation, was about 10 times more expensive than the iPhone was when it launched. And obviously that's to do with economies of scale, to do with production of scale and so on, and the savings in the technology industry as it grew. But it's also worth mentioning the iPhone is 500 times smaller and is 100 times faster, and it's actually also, just out of interest, it weighs 100 times less. So all very straightforward numbers to think about. Okay, it's actually 500 times smaller. So with those things in mind, we are seeing a huge change from the people that started with that first portable computer to the people that work with those iPhones. Now, why am I drawing attention to that? Well, there is one other thing to mention. The iPhone is essentially, unless you turn it off, always connected to something, right? It's always on the Wi-Fi or on the internet or if you like, on your cell services. So it's on all the time, okay? And one of the things I want to do is borrow a slide from one of our partners called Cisco, who I'm sure many people know, that was published, I think, quite a while ago now, about 2015, this slide comes from. And as you mentioned earlier, you can see the growth of devices that are connected to the internet over time, and this is, I think, it's terrific. Now, it is worth mentioning, this is what we call connected devices, and I'll come back to that in a minute when we talk about IoT and connected devices, because there is a slight difference. We need to just make sure we talk about it. But I like this slide for lots of reasons, partly because there's some very funny devices on here, like a connected toothbrush. I'm not entirely sure how valuable that really is, but the real point about this is that only 500 million computers of any kind were connected to the internet in the early 2000s. But only a few years later, you can see that, in fact, by 2016, we're talking many more, 8.5 billion and plus of devices. And when the kinds of devices changed, suddenly from large computers, you've got light bulbs, you've got fridges, you've got ovens, you've got wind power, you've got traffic lights, you've got all sorts of interesting devices that may or may not be successful in the marketplace, but the point is they generate data. And even more recently, we've got door locks. I mean, I have a door lock that I can open with Wi-Fi, right, to get in and out of my house. I have to have the gadget, obviously, because I work in that space, right? So this is really important because all of these devices create a lot of data. And it's a well-known statistic that somewhere in about 2015, there was a study done that showed that some 127 devices are added to the internet every second around the world, right? And
you're talking about 50 billion in 2020, as per McKinsey report. It was supposed to reach in 2025. So in fact, we have added more devices.
Exactly, we're ahead of target. Yes, absolutely. It's insane how quickly that's escalating. Now, why do we care about that? Because of the whole concept of analytics. So if you have lots of things creating lots of data and you don't have anything helping you look at that data, how are you ever going to get any value from that data? So that's why analytics is so vital. That's why we play such an important role in the value chain of that data from creation to value. And on the flip side of it, it is also worth mentioning that if you don't have any data or the right kind of data, then there's not really much you can do analytically, right? You need to have data to be able to come up with models that could then add value to your sources. So there's a careful balance you have to make between the two. So in the old days, And before sort of 2010, the general rule of thumb was, well, let's just grab all the data, which makes me laugh, right? But in the old, you could almost say, well, I'll just get myself a Hadoop distribution somewhere, I'll put it in my data center, or maybe I'll use this new thing in 2010, I'll use this new thing called the cloud, and I'll stick stuff in the cloud and see how, see what I can do once I've collected it all. It's a bit like thinking about saying, oh, I'll just download the internet, and I'll keep a copy of it on my hard drive in case I need it for later, right? It's a silly concept. But that was what people used to do. They used to say, let's collect it all, and then we'll analyze it when we've got it all. But the world isn't going to work that way anymore, because the average internet user consumes about 1.5 gigabytes of data a day. And if you're my daughter, by the way, it's way more than that, as I've discovered, right? She watches lots of streaming movies.
No, you can get lost all that data. I mean, don't know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, what do you keep, right? Single hospital can produce 3 terabytes of data a day on average. A car, the modern cars like a Tesla, generates about 4 terabytes of data a day, most of which is not used or even doesn't even leave the car at the moment. It's not really doing very much. An aeroplane, you can imagine, generates an awful lot of data, 40 terabytes, and a large factory, a petabyte of data a day. So that concept of, hey, let's just save it all, isn't really valid anymore, right? I mean, that's the point I'm making here. So one of the ways you deal with that is you come up with new disruptive ways to deal with that technology. So this is one of our examples. We've got a solution called SAS Analytics for IoT, which handily also has the same letters in its name as our key concept, which is artificial intelligence of things. And we like to talk about this as being the way that we help people derive greater value from the data that might be coming from all sorts of places, whatever the situation you're in. And so that's why I wanted to just make sure I was able to tell you a little bit about that, so that people get an understanding of where we're coming from as a company in terms of our IoT knowledge, but also in terms of how that then applies to things in the insurance space. Any questions about that, Ashish?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, very, very interesting. Couple of things. Like the iPhone is 500 times smaller and 100 times faster. About the data, and I remember when we started, we used to have 10 GB hard disk, and it's plenty of hard disk. Now we have even 1 terabyte, and even then it is less because so much data we are storing, and we don't know what to do about it.
So it's really funny you should say that, because I went with some of our newer members of the SAS company to an event about a year or two ago. There was a sort of pop-up museum in London, and it was a museum of computer technologies. And I'm walking around that museum with people in their 20s who, recently, just started work, and they go, "Wow, look at that! I've never seen one of those before." And I turned to it was a floppy disk, and I said, "I used those." It made me feel quite a dinosaur.
Yeah, absolutely. So, tell me, what are the latest IoT trends in health, life, and general insurance? Because we're talking about insurance sector, and health which is very important during this pandemic. So, I would like to be eager to know. I'm actually curious to know about how IoT is trending in these areas. Yes.
That's a really good question, and I mean there is so many areas of disruption and transformation going on, especially in the health space, which of course affects insurance. But before I sort of start sharing some information in that space, it's important, I think, just to address the concept of IoT in that space and connected. So we've talked about, I've been talking mostly about what I call connected devices rather than specifically IoT. It fits under the IoT umbrella, but IoT is, and most people will know, is generally defined as machines that talk to each other without human interaction. So the general rule is, if it's a machine that interacts with humans or requires interaction with humans, then it's not considered generally IoT as a purist definition. But I like to consider human interaction devices as IoT devices as well. And that's because for us as an analytics company, we need to think about all connected devices as sources of data. And, if you are wearing an Apple Watch like mine, okay, it is a wearable device. It has loads of sensors on it. And yes, it requires interaction from me to do certain things, but other things happen automatically and could gather data automatically. So therefore, to me, it's still something that I consider to be a sort of IoT related device. And that also, by the way, counts for vehicles, right? Because a car currently requires human input to drive, it's still considered more of a connected device than it is a IoT device, if that makes sense. But on it, there are thousands of sensors, and those do things automatically. So therefore, it's still, to me, relevant. Now, the reason I want to draw that distinction is because from here on, I'm mostly talking about connected devices generally, and that includes devices that have human interaction. So when we talk about healthcare, the sorts of things that we've been working on and seeing in the marketplace are generally around how it is with the growing population in the world, and in some parts of the world where we have an aging population and less younger people. How can we help allow people to stay at home longer if they want to, and work independently, feel independent at home, and maybe provide them with additional security and insurance around, without feeling like we're watching them, right? Because that's one of the problems with analytics and automation, is people feeling like, well, hang on, that's encroaching on my personal space. So one way you can do that in the health space is with things like audio. So you could and we do have examples, which I'll show in a moment, of utilizing audio signals to process things like people walking around a room. Are they boiling the kettle? Have they done that at the same time every day? Are they therefore going through their normal routines? And if so, then everything's fine. If they're not going through their normal routines, is there something that we can do to check that they're okay? That sort of concept, right? And we can have a look at examples of that kind of processing going on soon. Now, the other kinds of things in healthcare, of course, which are the most obvious ones, and that SAS is very heavily involved in, is helping the sheer weight of diagnosis of patients in, say, for example, scans or CAT scans, or where people have done X-rays, right? And for an average set of X-rays of, say, lungs or livers could be a very high pile of things for an expert to look through to detect problems with people's lungs or livers. But if you can use analytics or artificial intelligence to maybe run through those images first, instead of having a huge pile of things for one doctor to look through, you could maybe reduce that down to just the ones that the AI have detected as maybe needing further research, right? So that's a really good example of how in the health space you can use analytics and artificial intelligence to assist. And certainly when that relates to insurance policies, of course, then you're talking about helping perhaps predict or reduce claims by predicting problems sooner than perhaps you could otherwise do, and therefore catching people's illnesses and maybe providing proactive care in advance, right? Which is something that is really very much on people's radars, right? Obviously, I'm not the world's leading expert on health itself, but on the application of IoT in those environments, we've done quite a lot of things. So healthcare is definitely a space like that. And then, of course, you've got safety. People in construction, there's insurance related to people's working habits and what they're doing. So in the construction space, you might use cameras, you might use geofencing to make sure that people are carefully avoiding areas of danger. Maybe you're alerting them in some way if they go into an area where a crane could be dropping equipment or something like this. And there's quite a lot of people implementing capabilities like that, which are, again, linked to insurance policies, right? If people adhere to those rules in the environment, then the insurance is valid. So, yeah, healthcare definitely is an area of great growth. And general insurance, I mean, you probably know there are insurance companies right now that offer life insurance policies and also health-related treatment policies, private health policies, based on how well you comply with fitness routines. For example, on an Apple Watch, right? If you wear your watch and you do the certain amount of exercise per month, you don't have to pay as much for that Apple Watch than you might otherwise have to pay. It's a really good example, I think, of almost gamification, right? Getting people to reach targets and actually maintain some level of health and fitness, which is probably a really good thing in the modern world.
Yeah, in fact, very interesting aspects you have brought about, and one thing which really touched deeply to me was the health and safety of elderly people. And why this is important, because these days we have seen that the parents are alone and the children are abroad, or they are working in different cities, and they are continuously checking about their health, and they are worried, and they would want to know how they are faring every day in terms of their daily routine, so nothing is amiss. So that way it is so interesting and so important, I would say, because as the population is aging, these things will be very, very handy to understand. And
yes, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and actually, in the last couple of years, it's been very hard, hasn't it, to visit people in person.
Right.
So I think there's been a significant advancement of people experimenting with technologies like that in the last year or two, having realized that it really is an urgent thing to start to resolve, right? Because if we have another situation like COVID again, we really want to make sure we're prepared better for not being able to see people in person as much, right? And I think that's a real impetus. It's providing a real impetus in the healthcare and in the insurance space to try and find ways of helping that, and in the care space of helping that be easier should it happen again.
Yeah, and moreover, it is all integrated. It is all integrated. All the devices are there. So for anything, you need to integrate that information which is coming through. It is so handy to get this information, which helps the other person to disseminate information as well as understand what is going on. So it's very, very important, and that integration part, I think, is the best. So what development of IoT services for ecosystem as a long-term investment future capabilities? These are some of things which you have said. So what I am asking is, what is your opinion on insurance should see the development of IoT services for developing this ecosystem in a long-term fashion?
Yeah, so it's interesting actually. I think some of the major insurers that I'm aware of, and certainly in the UK, the ones that I'm familiar with, are definitely experimenting. We talked about the wearable technology, linked to personal policies, those kinds of things. So that's very good. But I think there is a new sort of disruptive element coming in the insurance world. It's been around a little while, but it's referred to as an insurtech. And it is definitely a space where there are startups being created that will come in and help disrupt, the sort of the way that insurance is done today and the way that it's been done for a long time. It's worth mentioning, the principles of an insurance policy were, created in the early 1700s, right? 1706 or something like that was the first actual insurance policy defined, right, for life insurance. And I think if we think about that, that's based on the principles and understanding of a world in 1706. Only 50 years before did they realize that the universe didn't revolve around the Earth, right? So I think so with that sort of thing in mind, maybe it's good to re-examine and disrupt and think about the insurance space today. And I think there's some really obvious stories out there which are very commonly discussed in the modern world. I mean, I can give you an example. So if you take a Tesla vehicle. Once you pick it up, you buy a Tesla, you pick it up from the factory and you drive it home and you think, gosh, that's fun. I wonder what I can do to tweak and improve my Tesla. So you've got your insurance policy you've taken out for the vehicle that rolled off the factory line. But maybe you think, oh, I wonder what's this mode here? Oh, I can turn it into, what do they call it? I think it's absurd mode or something like that. And it makes the performance of the engine and the vehicle, not the engine, the motor in the vehicle and everything about the vehicle change entirely from the original insurance policy. And you can do it by pressing a couple of buttons on your phone. So how does the insurance world react to that in this modern world that we're in? How does the insurance world think about autonomous vehicles? In 10, 15 years' time, that's going to be a standard. How do they think about managing the insurance and whose risk and fault and responsibility is different in incidents happening? So I think that kind of disruption is coming anyway because of the technical advancements, and I think insurance companies obviously have to move with the times to figure it out. It's going to be a fascinating time, and I think insurtech is definitely going to bring disruption to that space, but in a good way.
Yeah, in fact, what you're talking about, very interesting part is insurtech, which we are seeing a lot of disruption in the banking also with fintech companies coming in.
Yes.
And one thing which is very critical, which is coming out of all this, is that how can IoT impact market growth with the rising popularity of usage-based insurance solutions in the insurance sector? I mean, so far, as you said, the first policy was issued in 1706, and the parameters of risk assessment and all were very, very different what they are today.
Indeed.
Yeah. So. usage-based insurance is something which is very, very interesting thing. I would curious to know more about it.
Yeah, so I've only really been exposed to the usage of it, and also how we can apply IoT capabilities or analytics to the IoT involved in it. So one of the things we could do is bring in some of our insurance specialists to have a deeper discussion in the future around their thinking in that space. But
right.
for sure, what I see about usage-based insurance over the last couple of years has been fascinating, because my daughter has just passed her driving test, and she had to take out insurance for her vehicle, and I think the insurance that she was quoted for per year was about £2,000 a year, which is obviously excessively high from my perspective. I think, gosh, that's a lot of money, right? But if we agreed to have a black box fitted in her vehicle by the insurance company, they would cut that down by half, right? So that allows her to pay only £1,000 a year. Still a lot of money, but anyway, it's £1,000 a year. And let's face it, I'm paying for that, right? But anyway, the point being that they are monitoring over time using analytics and statistical analysis the performance of her driving. They're not going to just cancel her policy if she exceeds the speed limit on any given day. They're going to look at characteristics over time, and then over a 3-month period or month period or whatever it is that they want to do, they're going to take into account all the metrics about her driving, maybe compare her to other drivers of the same age, and then come up with a policy over the year that will be suitable for her style of driving next year. And I can see a time where my daughter will experience insurance policies that might change based on your usage, without you having to go onto a website and change the data. If you move house, or you decide you don't keep the car in the garage anymore, or maybe you park it on the road at the moment, but then you buy a new house, you park it on the driveway, you're required at the moment to go in somewhere and change all of that, ring them up and talk about it all. But actually, they can do that automatically, really, if they wanted to, right now with telematics coming off vehicles and GPS and location stuff. And what great customer experience would that be if they say, oh, we've noticed you now keep your car on the driveway, we can adjust your policy to this amount. If you agree, let us know. That's customer service, right? And that's moving towards the customer intelligence side of things that people might like, right? So of course there's another side to that, which could be the side that people don't like.
Telematics in a while. Just one example which came to my mind is I was talking to somebody in the insurance sector, and it is said that which now these days there are no intermediaries. You are logging in, you are doing digital, you're searching for the policies, and you're buying on your own. And the device which you are logging in also makes a lot of difference. Suppose you're logging in from an iPhone, that will decide how much premium, how much insurance you can be given.
Well, it's true because
Yes, so that is what I was talking about, usage based. So there are so many things which will decide.
It's fascinating, isn't it? There's so many more metrics they take into account. You're absolutely right. I mean, yes, how are you even connecting to their website is something that they will consider, right? As part of the policy assessment, right? So yes, you're absolutely right. It's fascinating area, and we service the insurance industry. We help do credit scoring on claims and also on taking out policies. And it's a fascinating area to work in, and for sure, I hope it makes the experience for people better because of it. But there's so much more they could do. They could automate a lot more of that, I think, based on data available either from the vehicles themselves or from people's actual devices, as long as the people are happy with that, being used for those purposes, right? So.
Yeah, in fact, you were mentioning about your daughter getting a driving license, which is something which is to be cherished. It's something, we need to have a party once you get this license. Very important. So we come to a very important, which you mentioned briefly, is auto telematics.
Yes.
So how does auto telematics allow insurers to provide value-added services like driver feedback, theft prevention, and road assistance? I was just going through some article where it was talking about how many times you brake, the driver applies brake, what is the tire pressure, all these things. They have sensors which actually talk about deciding about the premium and what kind of insurance to be given to.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think in some areas, in insurance, we talked about earlier on, an average car in the modern era generating about, I think it said 40 terabytes of data a day. A lot of that data doesn't really leave the vehicle and is not yet used for much beyond, anything except historical review by an engineer when you take it in for a service, right? And there's definitely, I think, insurance companies are still at the beginning of their usage of that data and still figuring out the right way to make use of it for helping with policy definitions. And, so I think some of it they do quite well. Other areas, they're still negotiating. So, for example, there's two kinds of telematics, right? There's the pure telematics coming off the vehicle itself. So that's where you've got the manufacturer putting inside, in the vehicle, the computer equipment that's in there already that generates lots and lots of data. Then you've got the sort of the hybrid that most insurance companies use today, which is like my daughter's scenario, where in fact they have designed with a partner some sort of black box that they're going to put in the vehicle, somewhere in the vehicle, and it just collects a few things independently. It doesn't really read stuff off the vehicle itself. It's sort of collecting things independently, such as GPS, speed, momentum, and a few other things. It could probably detect things like braking and stuff. I'm not entirely sure everything that's on those devices, but it doesn't necessarily read the data directly off the vehicle. So I think there's still some work to be done in some of those areas, right? Because obviously there's much richer data available in the telematics that comes from the actual vehicle itself, rather than these new devices that are separate and added in separately, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think most insurance companies tend to use those separate devices at the moment, but there are companies out there now that are partnering with the manufacturers and the vehicle manufacturers to provide methodologies for anyone interested, like insurance companies, to gather that telematics off the vehicles directly without needing a specialized box that has been designed for just specific things. And I think that is a major advancement. That will become a very useful way for insurers to be able to make more value from the data. And it's going to be a while. I'm not sure if any of the insurers are actually reading directly from telematics data off the vehicle yet. I think most of them still fit their own box. And that's partly because of, I think, rules and regulation and governance. They know what's in that box. They fitted it themselves. It passed certain rules and tests, so therefore they can do it. Whereas, of course, if they're connecting to the raw data on the car, they need someone else to really tidy that data up first. And they need to be sure that that's being tidied up in a way that meets all those requirements, right? So, making sure people's personal data is protected and so on. But once you have those things, you can move into a world which is really fascinating. I mean, we've been working in that space for some time. There are plenty of customers we've worked with and partners we've worked with who often ask us really interesting questions. So we had one where they wanted to know about vehicles passing a particular stadium in the United States, football stadium during particular times of day because of the congestion and the transportation problems, and that was used a combination of geofences around the stadium itself, and then data reading off certain manufactured vehicles where they were sharing the information. And that was a really interesting study that allowed us to help them optimize, closures of road, management of the things around the stadium during sporting events. Then you've got the other side of that, where you're maybe utilizing the data for customer intelligence reasons, and perhaps what you want to do is, as long as, and this is where it becomes a little bit tricky, you don't want people to feel like that you're being intrusive, right? So, I'll give you an example, right? If I'm driving my car past a Starbucks, right, and first of all, if my phone pops up with anything, I shouldn't look at my phone, right? That's the first thing. But if for some reason I'm able to see the screen of my phone, what I don't really know if I would like very much is my insurance company saying, "Hey, we're partnered with Starbucks. Here's a free voucher for you to go into Starbucks and buy a coffee." I might find that it's like, whoa, hang on a minute, you're really spying on me here. I don't know if I like that. But on the other side, if I get a pop-up that says, "Hey, we've noticed that you're feeling a bit drowsy, why don't you pop into Starbucks and grab a coffee on us, because we can see that you're feeling a bit sleepy from your driving habit," maybe I would appreciate that, right? And so it just depends on how you do it, right? And I think that's the subtlety that that artificial intelligence can definitely help with, right? To make sure they're using the right methodology to communicate with you for the right reasons and make you feel like it's something that's providing you benefit, right? So that's another example. And then finally, we've got, and I'll show some slides for this bit, just to give you some additional info. Where is my button for sharing? Share, there it is, share. So this is more to do with asset performance and management. But let me just share this and I'll go to the slide for it. So this is one of, sorry, there we go, that one. This is, sorry, I've gone to the wrong one. I wanted to show you this first.
Yeah.
So this is SAS working with, can you see that? It's just, I mean, these are just some web pages I scraped just to give people a little bit of background information. But this is about maximizing the vehicle uptime for a fleet of Volvo and Mack is the brand in the United States, vehicles as they move around the US doing their thing. And one of the challenges they have is maximizing or improving the service time and ensuring that they do the service intervals at a time that's most suitable, right? And one of the challenges they gave us was, well, okay, we've got a telematics gateway. This is Volvo themselves. They've got a telematics gateway. They receive this data from onboard devices, either from the actual vehicle itself or from ODB devices that they've plugged in. And what they wanted to do was find a way to use analytics to help improve the forwarding of information to what they call case creation and support. So this means, they're seeing errors coming off the vehicle. They want to know how important that error is. Is it something that we need to send the vehicle in for immediate service or replacement? Or is it something that we can maybe wait until the next scheduled service for the vehicle so that we can optimize when it needs to happen? And this has a continuous loop. So if there's something really important flagged, it will get passed through this flow, which is really a flow in the middle there of we call it a directed graph streaming assisted in memory flow, where the data transforms through various different things, gets checked through different filters and rules, and also analytics models, and it outputs value that says, forward down to the case creation and support team that there's a ticket needing to be created for this to be serviced, and send an email to the customer that they need to come in for a service, or they need to have this part replaced because it's fairly critical. So it's a very straightforward, and this is a very high level, by the way, example. But one of the things that's really important is that it can continuously learn over time as the messages and the data coming off those vehicles changes. And then I just want to take you to the next one, because just to give you an idea of the sort of scales we're talking about here and why we use streaming analytics becomes clear, because we want to make sure that it takes the shortest time as possible to get a ticket created if there's one needed based on the current scenarios of coming off that vehicle. So there's a sort of customer service level agreement, there's an SLA of 60 seconds to ensure that when there's a fault occurring, within 60 seconds, it's been passed through the system and it's decided whether there's something that needs to be done. And at this stage in the project, we're working with about 8 terabytes of data by now. There's 71 billion plus different measures being looked at all the time through these tools, through these streaming environments. And you can see that over time, they've detected about a billion faults or more. Why is that? Because at the moment, that's actually supporting a fleet of vehicles across the US of about 350,000 and more. And it gets bigger all the time, obviously, as they bring more and more of this online. Why have they done this? Well, one of the problems is that obviously you get errors all the time of equipment on vehicles and so on. And one of the things they were doing was, receiving information that something needed to be fixed, when in fact, maybe it didn't really need to be fixed. So we've helped them, using something like this, reduce the false positives they were receiving by something like 44%. And we've also helped them improve the diagnostic time by 70%. So that means much quicker diagnostics, right? Much faster diagnostics, and therefore reducing the time to repair something, but also reducing the frequency at which something is not available to transport product around the US. So it's a really important use case and story about using telematics in a way that improves the ability of your assets to do the job that they need to do. And obviously there's a knock-on effect to that for insurance, because you're talking about insurance of parts, you're talking about insurance of the vehicles, you're talking about if you have to replace parts, there's manufacturer's warranties, there's other kinds of insurance involved, and all of those things can be impacted positively as a result of implementing something like this. Yeah. So hopefully that's a useful overview of an example of telematics being used in a very positive way to add value with analytics.
Yeah, very, very valuable insight indeed. In fact, I'm amazed to see, by what percentage the repair time is reduced, by what percentage the other things, diagnostic time is reduced by 70%, which is very, very, it's amazing. And,
yes.
Yeah. So many things. I mean, and it is evolving, as you rightly said.
Yes.
We are evolving. These are some of the examples which are giving us so much of benefit, so much of interesting data which we can collate, which we can integrate to reduce so many things, reduce human pain, reduce time and efforts, everything. Obviously, it is very, very important to know all these things. Very, very interesting. I'm sure it would have been a very interesting insight for our viewers as well. And now,
I just on there very briefly, while I remember, I mentioned that I had some examples of audio being processed. So just so that people can get a sense of what that means, I thought I'd just show you. So these are a couple of the pictures of audio signals, and these are audio from heartbeats. And I mean, it's just to give you some examples. So there's a difference here between a regular and irregular heartbeat. And what you can do is pass the actual audio track, the sound, through a streaming engine like the one we were just talking about with Volvo, which will basically look for different patterns in the data. And this is a visualization, if you like, of those different patterns. And if there's an irregular heartbeat or something wrong with it, in this example here, they're using something called short-time Fourier transform to help them do that detection. If you can imagine, that happens in real time. So you could subscribe a streaming analytics engine to the audio of a monitor detecting heartbeats. Maybe it's somebody in their home, maybe it's someone in a medical scenario where you don't want to have to, maybe you don't have enough medical staff to continuously monitor them. And this could be useful to help give you early detection or early knowledge about something not going correctly with that person's heart. And then another example might be this one. I won't press the buttons, but this is well, I can if you want to hear it, but it might be a bit annoying. So that's a wheezing cough. And that's a picture of a wheezing cough. This one is a dry cough. And this one is a wet cough. You can see this. I'm sorry about all the coughing noises. Let's come off that slide and go back.
Which one is the dry cough? The one.
Yeah, the dry cough is this one. Okay. And because it runs on a bit, I'll stop it from running too long because it can get a bit annoying, I find. But the point is, these are the same. These pictures are pictures of those kinds of coughing. And again, if you use this as a way to help understand what you can do with live processing of that kind of signal, you can very quickly help diagnose things. And of course, these are being used now. This sort of capability is being used in test scenarios in, I think it's Japan, where they've got those first level GP doctors, which are basically robots, and they sit there in front of you. You do something like cough, and they can give you a first assessment, and then they can send that assessment to a real medical person who can then go, we see this is correct. This is a wheezing cough. That means that this could be a way to treat it. So, simple things like that, but fascinating from a healthcare perspective, but also, of course, fascinating perhaps from an insurance perspective, because it allows, as long as it's used correctly, to help people improve their health and help people manage their health better. Then I think insurance is a valid place to think about how they could utilize that. Yeah. Anyway, so I just wanted to show you that as well. So,
very, very interesting and very important, I would say, because I think the most critical aspect in health is diagnostics part. Mm-hmm. And if something is there to diagnose, like you talked about heartbeat, whether it's normal, it's high, lower, so that gives an indication. And the same thing with the cough, the sound which is coming out, whether it's a dry cough or it's a different type of cough which we have, and it gives a clear indication, and it helps in diagnosing doctors. It happens because I had issue with my son a couple of months ago, We were struggling, and for a month he was struggling, and we were not able to diagnose what actually the problem is. So, as you rightly said, it is diagnostics, and this is where IoT will be very, very helpful for a common person in the health sector, which is so important even today. In pandemic, we have seen that people are suffering so much, and this will be a very, very big boom rather in health sector. It has been such an interesting discussion with you, I know, and I wish that we can go on and on, but the paucity of time, and I'm sure we'll call it a series, and this is one of them, and we'll call you again for different sectors rather. This is the insurance sector, then we'll discuss about more of other sector, maybe manufacturing, maybe telecom, where all IoT will be interesting. So before we end, just wanted to ask you, what is the future of IoT? If you may tell us more about it, how it is advancing, how it is evolving.
So, a very quick answer to that within the insurance industry specifically, I think, is that is what you can see what we focus on. We focus on helping IoT be more useful by adding analytics to it, but putting the analytics in the right place to be of the most value. So in other words, if you build models, you can then put them somewhere. Maybe it's near to the device that's registering. Maybe it's on the device. Maybe it's on the watch. Maybe it's in the phone. Wherever it needs to be to add the most value. And I think in the insurance space, that's the sort of thing that is going to change quite a lot. But there's a lot of adoption to happen first. And they do, I think, for insurance, they are going to be, and they are already, but they're going to need to think about the disruption that this kinds of technology bring to the very way that they do things, right? It's no longer a case that you can assess someone's insurance risk one day and then a year later just reassess them. You're going to need in the future to continually reassess people based on changing data and over time. But I think also people need to be accepting that that's the way that insurance will work for them in future. Overall, outside of insurance as a broader subject, I think the future of IoT is to become a sort of everyday accepted thing in our lives. Wearable technology, even embedded technology. I mean, there are companies working on contact lenses that can adjust over time without you having to have operations. There are people working on contact lenses that have video screens in them, right? It's going to just expand massively, and the impact on society, I hope, will be, as an optimist, I hope will be fantastic for us all in time, used correctly.
Absolutely. No, I'm sure with so many devices being connected and such data being integrated, I'm sure there will be hundreds of applications which will be evolving for a period of time, which will be so helpful for the mankind and people as such, and will help in all the sectors, whether it is insurance, construction, telecom, auto. There are so many sectors, health, where IoT will be a most important thing. Thank you very much for coming on our show, and as a token of appreciation, I will request my team IT person to present you a digital certificate.
Fantastic. How wonderful. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love it. Thank you so much.
And it has been a wonderful, and believe me, I just saw the watch and I said, oh my God, it's already 1 hour. So many things we wanted to talk about. So many things, so many insights are still, you love to have with you. I'm sure we'll call you once again, and we'll talk and take this further.
I'd be more than happy to join you again. Thank you so very much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Mobin, for all the support.